Okay, so I've been a producer for a very long time, and I'm going to do a little bit of a chat about what I do, but I also want to just let you know that producers, loads of producers out there, all work in really different ways. So the way that I work isn't necessarily the right way to work, it's just the way I work. So if you're a producer, or you're thinking about becoming a producer, or you're working with another producer, you might think, oh, the producer I work with does not work like that. And that's fine. There isn't like a set way. So what I do as a producer is I listen to the artists. I work inside the studio or with the artist as much as possible. In an alternative world, in the normal world that we used to live in, I would meet face to face as much as possible. Even if we have to call, I always try to Skype so I can see people. I guess I kind of, with my role, work a little bit as a critical friend as well, but if asked to, like, I would never push my point of view on anyone, but I'm nearly always asked to, and I work in like a really creative way with the artists that I work with. So I try to think about what a venue wants, like what an audience would want. So I kind of think about the work with the artist from that point of view. So, and that might involve like offering advice on, an artist might say, I want to make a piece of work with 8 dancers and it needs a 2-day get-in. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work because financially that's too expensive. Let's rethink it with 3 dancers and a smaller set and things like that. So I'm trying to also always think about, yes, encouraging the artist to be as creative as possible, but bringing in my knowledge and my advice. So I also do tour booking, I write contracts, I book workshops and other wraparound activity. I try to create new opportunities and new partners. So I'm always trying to think about, oh, this person would be really good to join up with, this person would be really good. And always thinking about, oh, how can I sell this artist and their work to make them financially sustainable? I problem solve a lot. I write funding bids and other applications. What I usually do is try to get the artist to be involved in that. So I might get them to write the first draft and then I shape it. We spend a lot of time talking. So I really understand what their creative process is, what they want to do, what they want to make. I network. I make sure that I know what's going on locally and nationally. I'm on mailing lists. I go to like what next networks and things like that, so that I'm always trying to get a picture of what's happening. I spend a lot of time talking to everyone and getting information and making sure that I've really understood. I liaise with venues, I negotiate fees. I also, as well as writing contracts for artists, write contracts for venues. I often write copy, think about the marketing. I sometimes write press releases, invite VIPs to sharing, previews, press nights. I strategically plan, so I make sure that artists are being realistic in what they can do. And I do a lot of finance stuff as well. So budgeting, cash flow, make sure I'm up to date on like ITC, equity, musician union rates, that kind of thing. And probably most importantly, I do a lot of morale building. I buy a lot of coffee, sometimes wine, sometimes gin and tonics. And I think that's really important. It's really important that everyone's happy. I used to often call myself the cleaner as well, because I think a good producer is responsible for everything and often have to clean up a lot of mess, and sometimes have to be the person who's hated. And that's hard, but that's my job. So I think if you are thinking about working with a producer or as a producer, I think that a good producer lifts work off the artist so they can concentrate on making the work. So the artist can really concentrate on creating and focusing on making the best work that they can make. A good producer listens, but also a good producer doesn't drop their daily rate. So I'm also upfront about how much I charge and how much I cost. but I will always agree to meet for a coffee and chat over a project. I'll always share some advice and see if we could work together, and that bit will always be free because that's about relationship building. So I try to be as transparent as possible. I know when to apologise, say that I don't know something, or that I've forgotten to do something, or admit when it's my fault. And for me, that's like the biggest bugbear I have, when people that I work with aren't willing to hold their hands up and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, that's totally my fault, I forgot to do it. And I will always be the first to say that. And I'm juggling multiple projects. I am really busy all of the time, and sometimes I will let things slip. I try not to. I try to be as organised as possible. Sometimes, particularly the world we're living in at the moment, I can't always do that. I see a lot of work. So I go and see work all the time. I obviously don't now. Try to see some digital stuff, but I go and see loads of work all the time. So I can say, oh my God, I saw this amazing show and they did this and this and this, and maybe we can think about doing that. And I have a lot of notebooks and I write everything down. So I think the pros of being a producer is that I get to work with lots of lovely artists. I get to support great people who are making interesting work. I can have a flexible job. I can work times that suit me and days that suit me. I actually love writing funding bids and putting together spreadsheets, which is really useful. And the work that I do is often front facing. So I get to say to my friends and family, oh my God, I'm working with this amazing artist and they're doing this show and you should really come and see it. And that's great. I often get to employ my friends, which is really lovely as well, because loads of the artists that I've worked with have become lifelong friends. So, and I think when you go through something that's incredibly emotionally and financially stressful, or you create something you're all proud of, then you get to form a really great bond together. And I love sharing my knowledge. I genuinely believe in helping the next generation of producers succeed. And I think that when you work with lovely companies who appreciate you, lovely things will happen. You'll come home to flowers on your doorstep, or they'll just buy you a really nice hand wash when they know you've just had a new bathroom. And that's really nice. It's really lovely to work with great people. The cons are it's really difficult to have boundaries. Artists often call or email at all times, and it's really hard to say that you aren't available, because you do often need to be a shoulder to cry on, or like I said before, you need to solve those problems. It's stressful, particularly when all the finances on your shoulders for doing a really big show, and it can be, you can find it like, you've got to get every single penny in for the artist or the company you're supporting to break even or make a profit. That can be really stressful. Work's often dependent on funding decisions, even when you're producing for an NPO. So even at South East Dance, I often can't do things I really want to do because I have to wait for the funding to come in, or I have to try and get the funding. Often, like I said before, you have to be the person who's going to be hated. It's much more important that the choreographer or the director you're working with is liked by the cast and the team, and somebody has to be the bad guy. You have to be the person to say no when budgets are tight. You have to be able to put your foot down, and this can often affect morale and potentially the artistic vision. But at the end of the day, everyone will be really happy that they were paid and that the company didn't go bust. Managing expectations is really important. So often artists come to me and say, I really want to work with a producer. I need a producer. That's the next step. And they often think that once they have a producer, magically they'll be able to get a tour, they'll get more bookings, they'll make more money, they'll have no admin to do. And it just doesn't work like that. So you have to really manage expectations. You can lose friends when you have to make a decision that's right for the show, the work, or the company, which goes back to often being the person hated. I will often be the last person to be paid, especially if it's a show that I'm running. I've had to make a decision for cash flow that I wouldn't pay myself until box office money came in, so I can make sure all the artists were being paid. You can't share your worries with the team. You have to be the person saying that everything will be all right, even when you're losing sleep over ticket sales and your leading lady has been knocked off her bike whilst not wearing helmets, and you have to phone her mum in the morning and recast in the afternoon. True story. You don't get the glory, which is fine by me, but for a lot of people, it's not. It might be your idea that made the show. It might be your work that sold the tickets, your great gimmick that got the national press, but no one will know except you. And that is fine with me. But I have had other friends who I've worked with who were angry on my behalf. I'm like, no, it's fine. That I'm genuinely fine with that. So if you're thinking about being a producer, my tips would be learn what everyone does. So learn the basic skills needed to do all those jobs so you can have conversations with people. So learn what lights are called, how a sound desk works, even if it's just turning it on and off. It's really important. Learn what the stage manager does and how important they are, and be as knowledgeable as possible. I've had loads of times where I've walked into a big venue, and no offense to anybody in the room, but the technical people, the majority of them are men, and they assume that I don't know what I'm talking about, and they try to railroad me. And I'm like, no, we can use this light and that light, and it'll be fine. And then things turn around. So it's important. And if you don't know while you're learning, ask questions, find a really friendly venue and volunteer, use YouTube, talk to a friend who is a lighting designer and ask them, what is this light called? What's that light called? How do I do the basics? Network. It's really hard at the moment, I know, but go to events, sign up mailing lists, see what's happening in the arts world, read reviews, use YouTube. If you can't afford to go to a venue, have a look on YouTube. There's loads of stuff, but just be as knowledgeable as possible so you can have conversations with people, see work. If you can't afford it, become a reviewer. There's loads of little things that you can sign up. Again, we're talking about when the world returns to normal, but there's Broadway Baby, Total Theatre, your local paper, Fringe Guru. You can sign up to be an audience ambassador. Lots of companies have schemes. Lou, the lovely Lou Coate, will be able to explain a bit more about Kaleidoscope at Brighton Festival. You know, there's things like that. Watch live streamings. Learn to write funding applications. So it's really important. There are free courses often run by Arts Council. We run them at South East Dance. There's the FSI. Practice writing them. Learn to use Excel, make it your friend. Get someone who's really good at it to teach you in return for some cake or some wine. Use YouTube, Google it, practice. Be nice. Don't ever say anything negative about work until you are behind your own front door at home. The amount of times I've heard people come out of a venue and say something bad, and I will never get pulled into that. Be prepared, know your artist's work, know their website, when the tour dates are. Someone's always going to ask you that question, and learn the legal stuff. Have a look at ITC, think about joining. You can join for a small amount of money if you haven't got a lot of turnover at the moment. There's a bit of info on equity. If you're a member, you can get access to more info. There's stuff on Musicians Union. But learn how to do risk assessments, learn what public liability insurance is, how to do tax, how to do national insurance, what VAT is, holiday pay. There's free courses out there. There's Mind the Gap, Brighton Fringe run free courses. There's website resources that are out there. That is a very quick whistle-stop tour through what I do and some tips. Pip, do you want to do questions now, or we're going to hand over to Jen?
Should we see if anybody's got any specific producer questions? We've got 5 minutes left for those. If anybody's got anything that they'd like to ask right now, or Jonathan's got his hand up.
Hiya. Sorry, Lou, you mentioned about seeing work, and you can sign up to some reviewing websites and things. Can you just say them again? I've got a few down, but I missed some.
Yes, I will say them again, but also Pip can email them out.
Okay, great.
So that's probably easier. I'll put them in a little, I'll share them with Pip and she can email them out to you.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, well, maybe we can hand over to Jen and we can come back to more of a conversation at the end.
Cool, thank you. I've just taken furious notes, Lou, thanks very much. Okay, let's see, I'm gonna do a sharing screen situation. Let's see, I'm gonna share my sound. Let's do. Okay, there we go. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, cool. Can you see my whole screen? Am I operating? Fabulous. I always like to start with a swear word quote, mostly because it generally sets the tone for how I'm going to try to go through this. And also one of the things that somebody told me once, which I love, which is it's not as serious as you think, try to enjoy it. So I'm going to try and do that. So as I said at the beginning, so my name is Jennifer Irons and I have a background in dance and I trained at the Place and did contemporary dance. That was my specialism. But as I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, I have a portfolio career. So I do lots of different things. And through different dance projects and through my networks, which I'll talk about in a minute, I've gotten into doing movement direction, which is sort of related but different. So let's see if I can make this happen. Oh, but first let's watch a video. Oh, I knew I did something smart. Okay, hang on. I'm going to try this from my computer. If it doesn't work, I'll put the link in the chat for you guys and we'll try it online, but let's see if this is going to work. Sound is good? No sound? Ooh. Okay, let me just try this again. I'm going to try again. We'll try one more time. So it was no sound, yeah?
No, there was sound, there was no video.
Oh, well, let's try this. Okay. Can you see any video now?
Yes, we can see the screen.
No, did it work? And now it's playing. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not going to try that again.
See it, and then it went.
It came and it went?
Yeah.
I'm going to just do the link in the chat. Is that all right? Is that the best? I think that might be the best way. The irony being that this is the second talk I've done this week where the tech has gone, but I think it's just me this time. Okay, here we go. How's that? Cool. Should I give you a minute and a half to look at that? Okay. I will mute myself. Just do me all the thumbs when you're done. Marvelous. Okay. So video, I love a video. That just helps, doesn't it? So I'll go back to sharing my screen. Play video, done. Is my share working? No, let me try again. Sorry, guys. There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay. So important things that I wish people would have told me when I was doing some of these talks. Career progression as an artist. This is just basically to say that every job I've ever done did not get better artistically, more satisfying, and all of a sudden pay me more money. As Lou was saying, you know, some of them are volunteer to do something because I really want to be involved and learn from somebody who's working on the project. And another one is a whole buttload of money and usually has very little dance involved. But it's to just accept and to understand that it isn't a straight line where everything gets better all the time. So I think the current situation right now, it's that little squiggle up in the right-hand corner is basically 2020, although I made this slide about 6 years ago. So there we go. So what is a movement director? So this is kind of, I'm going to do a little bit of a mishmash of my own experience and Wikipedia. So Wikipedia tells me that movement directors collaborate closely with the director, performers, and wider creative team to realize the physical language of a work. So the English version of that is there is something on a stage or on a platform or in a show, and there are bodies involved, and somebody needs to work with the people who are attached to those bodies to make it real and make it believable or make it the vision of what the director wants. That includes different sort of elements. So that can show up in theater, film, TV, opera. Those are all the kind of obvious ones. Fashion shows these days love to hire directors and choreographers. Video games are so much more realistic and they're so much more interested in how humans move. Animation, music videos, marketing campaigns, and I'm going to show you one later, and mass movement, which is the one that's at the beginning of that film, which is like all those hundreds of people, and that's a very particular kind of movement direction. So how would a movement director work with a director or a performer or other? So I'm just going to fix my screen here because you guys are... Here we go. So you can collaborate with a performer to develop a character. So one of my favorite ones is Alex Reynolds, who's a choreographer and a movement director, working with Eddie Redmayne in The Theory of Everything, so that his character of Stephen Hawking was a believable character and not some really poor representation. Terry Notary, the movement director, who worked with Andy Serkis, who does all of the Planet of the Apes, all of the motion capture movement. You can collaborate with a team to do some kind of marketing, which this is the one I'm going to come to later. And then there's research and communication. So it's you understanding things like, how does a drunk person move in a play? How does a kid in a grocery store move differently if they're hyper, bored, tired? All of those things show up differently in the body. And you as an expert in movement and the body, this is the world that we're in. So what skills do you need to be a movement director? And I think this is going to be really similar to a lot of what Lou was saying. And I'm sure other Lou is going to say a lot of the similar things. So the first thing is listening. You know, what is the objective? Is it that I'm trying to make a live show that I want all of the actors in the show to move like they are the apes for the Planet of the Apes, for example? Is it that I have a scene in this opera where I want everybody to look like they're underwater? All of these things are, you need to understand what is it we're trying to make it look like. Then you need to understand what movement is. And there's elements of this that are kind of, can be tied into Laban notation or choreology, if you've ever heard of this. And it's the real study and understanding of movement. Then the next phase is an understanding of character. So a 90-year-old woman isn't going to sit, drink a cup of tea, or talk to somebody in the same way that a 13-year-old kid from somewhere. Do you see what I mean? So it's really understanding, going back to what's the objective, who's that character. You need to be a good collaborator. So how do you share those ideas? Often you're a kind of in-between person. So the director has said, I want this to look like this, or I want this scene to happen. And then you have a set of actors who very often are not necessarily really movement trained. So you have to get the idea of what that director wants, work out how to get that movement to come out of the people who are going to perform it ultimately. So there's an element of being able to communicate. There's an element of translation. How do you get that idea from that person's head into those people's bodies so that that audience reads it like this? There's something really important with this. This is my own feelings about it, is that you have to have an inclusive approach and that you have to work with the individual in front of you. So often I'll be working with a cast who are not professional physical performers. Often I work with casts who are not professional performers in any way, shape, or form. And there has to be a way that you can celebrate what their physicality and their ability and how they move does the job of what you need it to do within that performance. It's not a crappy version of the thing that you had in your head. I'm not articulating that very well, but we can come back to that. But inclusive approach is a really important thing. Research. I'm trying to think of an example. Actually, I'll come to the research one and the marketing one in a minute. If I don't know anything about Russian caravans or say Russia from a certain period, I will go and spend loads of time looking stuff up, trying to find film if they've got it, or written stories, or anything that gives imagery or ideas or things like that will help me communicate how that movement might work physically and what that movement might mean to somebody who's watching it as an audience. There's an element of teaching. So once you figured out what you think that movement might be, you still have to work with whoever's going to do it. There needs to be a huge element of trust. So in these teams, there's a huge kind of collaborative, it's a team that each person has a craft in that team. So there's a composer doing something and a director doing something and a performer doing something and a technician doing something and a producer doing something. And everybody has a specific thing that they're trying to do that ultimately the sum of all those parts are all going to create this thing that's bigger than anybody would be able to do individually. And to do that really well, you have to be able to trust each other, and then you're not kind of stepping on each other's toes. And the last thing, and this is kind of the most important, going also I think to what Lou was saying, is that it's not about me. So the show that's on that stage, it isn't about my choreography, it's not about my movement, it's about the show being the best it can be, and about the people who are taking part, if it's a community-based project, and about the people who are part of the team that have made it happen. So is that all okay up until now? I was doing a check-in. We're all good? Yeah, Pip, how's my time? I got 6 minutes? Great, okay, so let's do just a quick, here's some examples of some of these things. So this is a theater example, devised play for the end of your show. It's an ensemble cast. So I was hired as movement director working with young actors on a pre-vocational training program. So they're young, they're fairly inexperienced. There's a lot of outside stuff going on within this group in particular, and they are not movement people. And you know, day one, it's getting people to take their socks and shoes off and be in bare feet is a challenge. So this is who I've got in front of me. So I'm working with the director. This is a devised piece, and I'm working with these young actors, and we are all in a room together. We are workshopping ideas. The director says, what if we tried a scene like this? There will be props around. I'll be working with them, but this will include doing a warm-up session like you would in any kind of sort of dance session, looking after people's bodies, and then workshopping ideas with the actors so that they're feeding into, it's their characters that they're creating. So it's very much a sort of three-way role, this one. So here we are jumping around on some chairs. Oh, just a little moment for the creative process. Let's all just take a moment to appreciate that it is like this every single time. Anybody who has that moment where it's the 5 days before opening of the show or opening of the thing and you're freaking out, you can raise your hands. It's all right. It's normal. Yeah, this is totally normal. This is actually scientifically proven. As humans, we procrastinate until we absolutely have to do it. So example number 2. So this is mass movement. This is slightly different in that, again, my role is very much to support the director. So the director of this is Akram Khan's piece. And my role was to get the 1,000 performers to the place that they needed to be at to make the show what the director had envisioned. So it's the translation role, it's the teaching role, it's supporting the lead dance artists who are working with the smaller groups. And it's a lot of morale boosting, as Lou was saying earlier as well, because you've got 700 to 1,000 people who potentially have never performed in their life, and they're going to do that one. So that was the one in the video. Let's just do, oh, and here's a little rehearsal. I hope this works.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. 3, 4, 5, 6, double time. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7 to the right. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, pause.
So again, being able to communicate, they all speak French. I did that one in English, but halfway through that, I was trying to learn to count it in French. And then they all told me, no, Jen, in Paris, we actually count in English anyway. So, you know, learning. And this is another one where it's very much not about me, even though I'm the one sitting there on the microphone counting that. It's about all of those people who are performing. And that role is very different than when I'm the choreographer of my own show with my dancers and I'm paying them. And I think that's a really big distinction. And ultimately, it's not my piece that's going on that stage, it's the choreographers. My job is more of a technician with an artistic eye on what's happening to make it all work together. Oh, we've done that one, right? Oh, and this is mass movement uses a particular thing. I just threw this in there because I thought it might be interesting for some people. When you do really big shows with big casts, it's impossible to imagine that number of people in your own head. So we use a technique called charting. So this is the stage effectively. This is the Hotel de Ville in Paris where they're performing. And each one of those colored dots in that rainbow is a dancer to scale in that space. And so to work out how this show is going to run, we have several charts. So this is the opening. Then halfway through, they're a bit spread out. The last chart, those dots are all over the square. And that helps us. That's basically our blocking. That is how we set the stage because it's so big. You can't do it with your own human eyes. You have to use computer programs. Who knew? And then the last one example I'll use, this is one I did as a movement consultant to develop a brand campaign that was centered around the body. So this had no actual live movement in it. It was a series of photographs that were being used for a marketing campaign. But to get the realism, so this is what I was talking earlier, the company decided they needed to hire somebody who was a specialist in movement to help them get the reality of what they needed this to look like. So this was for like a bandage company, like a wound care company. It was all medical stuff. And they wanted to show liquid and how these things were made from water. And it was the best thing for how to heal human. Look, it's the whole proper thing. I'll skip all this. So we worked with we did all of our research. And then here we are on this far side. This is working with a performer, a dancer in a studio to work out what those positions would need to be. Some of them didn't work because they were too static. It didn't feel realistic enough. Once we figured out what the real ones were, we created a whole storyboard. We went to this really fancy studio at Pinewood and took 3D photos. And I think it's 280 cameras go off all at once. And every time they take a picture, it uses like 30,000 megabytes. It was huge amounts of data. It was quite an experience. Here's the process. So working with one of the performers, then they get this 3D scan photograph. It gets rendered into a computer. The animators have their way with it. And then you get this liquid body at the end. So this is what it ended up being at the end. Here's all of their branding. Oh, and then, okay, how would you work with a movement director? Last little bit. Lou Cope knows about this. She was involved. So this is on the other end. Even though I'm a performer and a choreographer myself, if it's my work and I'm on stage, I can't see myself because I'm in it. So for a show that I did a couple of years ago called Yukon Ho, I worked with a movement director to help me work out what would be happening in this moment with this character. Where would she be on stage? How would she be carrying herself? How would she be sitting? So it's just to kind of point out that even though I know how to do that, I don't know how to do it on myself. How would you find work as movement director? Networks. I know we're all going to say this, and I know it's a bit hard right now, but all of the people that are in this virtual room, you guys are a network with each other. And in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years from now, this is the same people you're still going to be looking at and seeing around. So be really good to each other now and realize that you are all actually a network with each other, if that makes sense. There's all the official job places, Arts Jobs, One Dance UK, and other kind of professional job sites. This is all sort of traditional stuff. Friends, tell somebody that you're looking for that kind of work. You'd be amazed at how much stuff comes your way. Southeast Dance is an organization that are here to support you and offer things and connect you to things. If they know that you're trying to develop skills in movement direction, or you want to find out more about it, when somebody comes to them and says, I'm looking for a movement director, they can go, oh yeah, actually I remember so-and-so was talking about that. Or if 20 of you went to them and said, we really want to get some work in this or workshops in this, can we try to work something out? Use the organization that's here to support you to find the stuff that you're really interested in. Other theatre organizations, a bit similar to what Lou was saying, you can send somebody a message and say, can I come in and sit in on your rehearsal and see how you guys are working? Read the programs to shows, find out who was working on that. If you see something you really like, go and look at that person's work and see what it is that they do and try to identify why it's the thing that you like it. And then it kind of gives you a pathway to follow. Industry specific tends to be through referrals. So that marketing campaign, I didn't get through kind of the dance world. I got through a marketing friend. So this is what I mean about friends. You have friends in weird places, and whoever would have thought that you'd be doing a bandage job. Do you know what I mean? Year 2, while I'm doing my plie, did I ever think I was going to be doing like a medical company campaign? So it's a bit, it can take, you know, who knows where they come from. And then this is, again, college training and university network. So if your school or where you have been to university is going back to them saying, do you know anybody who's looking for movement directors? Is there anywhere else that I can go and shadow somebody? Call us. Sign up for workshops, so where you can develop these skills. Same thing, get the emails from companies that are doing workshops and who's going to be in town. Look at the work of companies that use movement a lot in their work. Some of them are really, have been doing it for a long time. Although I would say now more and more kind of traditional theater companies, somebody might rap me on the knuckles for this, are interested in using it a lot more. And movement director as a kind of title or a job role is starting to become like a permanent role in some of the more traditional theater venues, if that makes sense. There is now officially MA and MFA training at lots of the theater schools. This is new. They haven't been around for a really long time. So I think that MFA at Central School has only been running for 2 years. Like, I think it's brand new. And I was saying earlier about choreological studies. So this is the study of movement, and sort of coming from Laubin's movement is at Trinity Laubin, and they do workshops, Jacques Lecoq School, and sitting at a bus stop. Your observation and your understanding of movement and how people are is probably the best training there is, because you seeing how people act and move and behave, that's the real world. And it's fascinating. Dead cat. This is
That's
just, yeah.
Your time is up.
Is my time up? I've got one, oh, last thing.
One.
There we go. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing. I'll put the links up and stuff afterwards and all those other things, or send it to you for email and thing. Is that all right?
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you.
There's one question in the chat, which is, what distinct differences are there between a movement director and a choreographer? I gather there may be a lot of crossover of skills between the two roles. What would you say is the difference between a movement director and a choreographer?
I'm sure lots of we can get into this, I think, with Lou, and Lou as well will maybe have thoughts on this. But for me, when I'm a choreographer, I am working to create dance, which is about steps and counts. I mean, that's a very, very basic way of putting it. As a movement director, I am working in between two people or two groups. So it's the director's vision and what this person's doing on stage. And it's more about what the movement is. And they cross over quite a bit, but you don't have to be a choreographer to be a movement director, and you don't have, and it vice versa, but it helps. I think it's an understanding of movement. And I think movement that tells a story for a theatrical purpose or for like the marketing thing is slightly adjacent to choreography as dance or entertainment for the movement itself. Is that all right?
Yeah, I think
I am looking at you guys.
I think what Jen alluded to earlier is that often on a show, like I've worked a lot in musical theatre, there's often a choreographer and a movement director. So the choreographer will do all the you know, everything that we all understand in the room, what a choreographer would do would choreograph the numbers, and the movement director would be, like Jen was talking about earlier, you know, and in one of the shows I worked on, in one scene the main guy is drunk, and she would focus on, okay, this is how you walk when you're drunk, this is how you would hold yourself. You know, in moments where a massive emotional thing happens between two of the characters, and she would talk to them about what is the emotional response on your body, what does, you know, how does that physically change the way you hold your body. So they are doing quite different things to the choreographer.
And one other thing I'd say is that I've understood that if you are a successful movement director in theatre, then no one knows what you've done, and no one can tell that you've done anything. And if they can tell you that you've done something, then it hasn't worked because it's too much, it's too obvious, it's too clunky. Actually, it's really subtle, and you give those things to the performer and they take it from there, which is different, of course, to a choreographer.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm just wondering what kind of techniques you use to impart the movement onto somebody else. And have you ever found somebody that just couldn't get it? Like, do you show them? Do you physically tell them to move different bits there? But like, how do you get them to embody what you're trying to?
So I think this is where the inclusive practice comes in. So I was associate artist with Ken Duco for about 10 years. And I'm sure this is, maybe you guys hear this all the time, but inclusive practice is about working with the body that you have or the body that you have in front of you. And that it's not a visual image I have in my head of what I need something to look like, and it's how my body works to invoke that image, if that makes sense. So when I'm working with, for example, those younger actors who don't necessarily have a lot of movement training, part of my job will be to go through some of the training they need to get to that place. So if you're rehearsing a dance company for a show, your warm-up class will probably be related to the types of movement you'll be doing in the show. Yes? So by the same kind of token, we might do lots of work on just them understanding how they embody them, how they understand their own body works. So it will be things like how they use their breath. So if something's too complicated or it's not quite right, that also think that's partly on me. In my job is to find what's the movement that works to still further the story, to still make the character believable, to still do the job that the director needs. And it's not about a certain set of steps. So this is quite a long, and it can be quite a tricky process, but that is part of my job, is to find the movement with them that's the right movement for them. And for the director or the dramaturg and the kind of wider team. Yeah.
Was there another question?
The other question's about producing, so I thought we could come back to it at the end, maybe.
Yeah, fine, that's fine.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Jen. I think it's fascinating. Could talk to you about it all day. Luke Hope.
Thank you, Pip. Hello, everybody. Hello again. So yeah, I'm going to try and talk equally quickly about dramaturgs. So I am a dramaturg. I work primarily in dance, as I said, also in theatre. I work with very established choreographers who've been doing this for years and years and years, and who make shows to all over the world. And I work all the way down the scale to brand new people who've just graduated and have really got something to say. And I love all of it equally. That's important for me to say that. And I can work in contemporary dance. I also work in ballet, large scale ballets and theatre, live art, but basically anyone that will have me, like Jen, for example. And the reason I do this job is because I'm in love with process. I love making processes. I'm in love with artists and how they make work and how they think and what it is they're on this planet for. I also love audiences and I value them and cherish them, and it blows my mind that people spend money to go to a theatre or a space or whatever to share this stuff together. I just never really got over how beautiful that is. But actually I don't want to make work and I don't want to perform. It's like the worst thing I could possibly think of. I want to help it get made. And I want it to be as good as it can be, and I want it to land with those audiences who've coughed up their precious money to come and see it. So that's what I'm driven by. And what is a dramaturg? Well, a dramaturg is somebody who accompanies. Actually, just give me a nod. Do you know what a dramaturg is? Give me a nod if you do. Yeah, most of you. Okay. Well, the thing is, it's a German term that comes. No problem. It's a German term that comes, you know, from 18th century theatre practices, and it's quite a sort of hard word, isn't it? But it isn't rocket science. It's actually very simple, and I'm hoping you'll see that. So yeah, a dramaturg is somebody who accompanies people on their creative processes. I will work with a choreographer or a dancer or an artist or a visual artist or a writer indeed, to just try to help them make the best work they can make. And sometimes a dramaturg is called a critical friend, a compagnon en route, a creative ally, any of these sorts of terms. The most useful one of those, I think, is a critical friend, because I'm your friend and I'm here to help, and I'll bust my gut to do so, but I'll be critical and I'll say, oh, I'm really sorry you think that works, but I don't. Can we talk about that? How can we figure out how to make it work? You may or may not agree with me, but that's the conversation that we'll have. And as Lou and Jen have said, it's not about me. I get my kicks and my ego is fed by helping other people do their work as well as they can, and for them to achieve what it is they want to achieve. So I work with people. I'm on the outside of the inside of their processes. That's how we describe it. So I'm not this close up. I'm over here with a bit of distance, not objectivity, because that's pretend. I can't have objectivity because I'm me and I have a heart and a soul and taste and all the rest of it. So I kind of reject that word. But I will work with artists as their dramaturg to help them develop their work. I should say something about dramaturgy. But I don't say it like that. Dramaturgy is a number of things. It can either mean working with a dramaturg, or it can mean what happens in your show, or in a piece of work. So dramaturgy, we call it the red line, le fil rouge, the line that goes from the beginning to the end of a piece. The end is different to the beginning. How it finds that journey through, how it flows through time and space and context is dramaturgy. Yeah. But I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that today, because we're mainly thinking about working with a dramaturg or thinking dramaturgically. But it's all about finding coherence for a piece or a show. So I come at it and I work with people with my honesty and my truth. It doesn't mean I'm right. I'm regularly wrong, but I will tell my truth, and I can't go home until I've done that. And I can't go home with some little secret thought in my pocket, because then I wouldn't be doing my job properly. And I work with people to look at their practice, or whether I can work on practice, on product, or the two together. So I can work with artists on their practice, especially right now during COVID. I've been working with lots of people who aren't making shows. So just thinking about what they're for, who they are, what their skills are, what they want to achieve, who they want to reach, where they want to do that, who they want to be in the rehearsal studio, how they want to work with artists and dancers and collaborators, etc. All of that stuff before we've even begun to get into a studio, and working in a studio. And then it's thinking about things like, well, I might do some research, that depends on the project, but it's talking about, you know, just looking at and understanding the movement languages in a piece, or the structure of a piece. Why does that bit go before that bit, and shouldn't that bit come over here? Is there a narrative? Is there some storytelling, or are there themes? What's the purpose of the piece? Asking lots of questions to help give it, my favorite words are shape and meaning. Help to find a shape, structure, but it's more than just structure, and help to have it, and help to find meaning and communicate meaning. So often the question I'm asking is, does it land? You think you've created this beautiful solo that's incredibly moving about heartbreak, but is that what they think? And it's not that you can own what an audience thinks, of course. They might think that, they might not. But if that's what you want to communicate, we need to try to test it and check whether you are communicating what you hope you are. And also to think about, yeah, who the work is for, who it's going to. And so I will do some testing around that. It's not just like, what does Lou think? We'll get somebody else in, or some other people in, and we'll show them a bit of work, and they'll say, oh, that bit was hilarious, that bit was far too long, and we'll respond to that, and we'll either take that on or we won't, but at least we'll have that information. So practice, product. But also what I try to do with everybody I work with, and what I try to encourage with everybody who makes work, is dramaturgical thinking. So you might not have a dramaturg, that's fine, but it's a really good idea to engage in dramaturgical thinking, which means to question your own practice, to question your own decisions, to interrogate, to notice. These are all the things that I do, but these are the things that you can do for yourself. To notice, okay, I work like this, or, oh, I really like downstage left, don't I? What does that mean? Whatever, just to really unpack what your own instincts are, to reflect on them, to build time and space in your own practice and your own process, to think about your own practice and your own process, not just doing, but reflecting on the way in which you're doing, and feeding yourself and challenging yourself as you go. And also just to develop the thinking, so to read things, watch things, have ideas, see that painting, whatever it is, and keep nurturing. So basically, those are the things that I do with other people, but those are the things you can do for yourself. And part of what thinking dramaturgically is just about doing that mindfully. So you do all of that anyway, but you've got to make sure you really do it, because audiences deserve it. And you've got to make sure you really nurture your own craft and the work that's going out there. Does that make sense? Okay, you can tell me afterwards if it doesn't. Just a little thing about why the hell would anybody work with a dramaturg? You know, it's not like you've got tons of cash lying around and you can't think what to do with it. I think there are a couple of key reasons. First of all, I'm constantly blown away by how reductive feedback systems are. Basically, you make a piece of work, you put your soul into it, you haven't slept for weeks, you think all of these things, and then you put it on. Some people watch it, at the end they go, and that's it. And if you're lucky in the bar afterwards, somebody will go, I love that, it was brilliant. But all the people who didn't like it won't. They won't tell you. And so how come you put all that work in and you come out of it not really getting the detailed response? And that blows my mind, because it feels like such a shame to me in terms of a learning cycle, but also, well, yeah, just in checking that it lands with people. So I want to be in there as a dramaturg. I want to try to help you understand the way your work is being received. Also, because if you're making your own work, you're blinded by your own proximity. Frankly, you are the last person to know how that work is reading, because you dreamt it, you slept it, you spent the last 6 years building up to this moment, it's here. And to have somebody with a bit of distance who doesn't care as much as you do, but does care, can be really, really useful to help ensure that you are communicating the way you want to communicate. And also I could go on about why you should have a dramaturg or why you should think dramaturgically, but I won't. But the other thing I think specifically here is that dance is a really difficult thing, and it's a really abstract thing. And I worry that dance alienates audiences, and we can't afford to lose dance audiences. It's too precious, it's too special. So I think it's worth the attention of trying to make sure that what you've carved and created so beautifully is being received in the way you hope it will be. So I'll work amongst the concept, I'll work in the context. Who is this reaching? Are you speaking to those people, and the individual person, you as artists? Who are they for? What are they doing? What is their raison d'etre, and how can we help them grow into that fully? Just looking at time. And in terms of processes, as Jen and Lou have both said, it's about this wonderful, gorgeous collaborative process. And having a dramaturg in that process is, again, so if you're the lead artist, you're the choreographer, you have a dramaturg who is your little creative ally. And I describe it as that for me, I'm like a minister without portfolio. So it's not my job to do the lights. It's not my job to do the costume. It's not my job to do the choreography, but it's my job to see all of these things and to see them through the lens of what you said you wanted to do. So I will work with producers, with movement directors, with designers, lighting designers, choreographers, dancers, and I'll try to operate in the spaces in between. And I have examples of going to Miss Lou Rogers and saying, does this work? Is this okay? And she said, well, I think that maybe this needs a bit of, and I will go back to the artist in, you know, full honesty and say, okay, I think we need to think about this. I'm not sure that's working, etc., etc. Because all of these people together have only one goal, which is to make the lead artist's work. It's not about us, it's about it. So yeah, I'll be in amongst all these people trying to nudge it forwards. You know, sometimes I'll be like, I don't think that lighting designer and that costume designer have properly communicated, so I'll bring them together and try to make sure that we're all together raising the game. And again, you don't need a dramaturg to think like this, you just need to think like this. So yeah, it's all about collaboration. And it's about me being honest, but I never make decisions. I haven't made a creative decision for 20 years, which is disastrous personally, because I can no longer decide what to cook for dinner or what colour to paint my house or anything. I can have an interesting discussion, but that's where it ends for me. So it's all, you know, there's no, I mean, there is power here, but there's no decision-making power. It's a hugely intimate role. People cry with me. People will tell me that they don't think they can do this job. Actually, it's all bullshit, isn't it? But then the next day they're much better, and we'll work our way through that. As Jen said, it's massively about trust. And it's also about how leadership is lonely, no matter what level you're at. If you and your mates are making a show, or if, you know, in 30 years time you have a huge rep company, it's always lonely. It's always difficult, and you always can benefit from having somebody here to talk to, a creative ally. I'm nearly done. And just to say how it works in practice, sometimes I'm in a studio, never more than a couple of days a week, but always, and of course, especially now, it's all on Zoom. I Zoom with people for a couple of hours at a time. They send me films, I watch them, I write to them, we talk about it, we watch it together. We're just always, it doesn't matter really that you're not in the studio, just always pushing forwards. So, if you're interested in developing conversations with dramaturgs, well, hi, I'm one. No, I'm joking. I'm not joking, actually. Hi, I am one. There's also something called the Dramaturgs Network, which has a huge number of members. But also, you know, I think probably the most interesting thing here is that I bet you there's a dramaturg on this screen right now, somebody who can get enough pleasure out of thinking around other people's processes and thinking around their work. It doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be my work, it can be their work. I bet there's somebody in here with those skills, or I bet you know somebody with those skills, and you don't need to start at the end of knowledge, you start at the beginning of knowledge and you try it. So you could say to one another, or to say to somebody, you know, I think I might have something to offer there. How's about I come into your studio for 4 hours, you do what you do, I'll feed in, it will be us discovering, but why don't we give it a go? And the thing about that is that if you think, oh, maybe I could do that, then you have to tell people, because they can't know unless you tell them. And also to say that I've been doing this for forever now, and every single day I have to question if I know what the hell I'm doing, and I'm always learning, and I'm always, if ever I think, I'm quite good at this, it falls apart the very, very next day. And that's true. So, you know, it doesn't matter that you're at the beginning, just think, just learn, just like I do every day. There are some courses around, I don't think they're very good. I might set up one, that will be brilliant, of course. And yeah, there are some books around, but they tend to be quite dry, so I would cherry pick those. But basically, if you enjoy thinking about process and developing thinking and trying to push work and wondering how you can evolve yourself or other people, that's dramaturgy. And I hope that says enough. And I hope that if you're interested in thinking dramaturgically or offering yourself as a dramaturg, then maybe you could do that, and you can always contact me for advice about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. My main issue is I keep losing my mouse because it goes on the other screen. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask Lou Cope about dramaturgy? Oh, Katie's got a hand up. No? Wasn't a hand up?
I think it was a hand up.
Was it a hand up?
It was a hand up, but only to crack my wrist, unfortunately.
Oh, to crack your wrist. Okay.
Apologies.
Anybody else?
I have a question, Lou Cope. How did you get into being a dramaturg? You know, it's not a traditional career path. We know there are still very few dramaturgs out there. How did you get into?
Which is just how we like it, actually. I got into it because I studied theatre, and I ran a theatre company, and I directed that theatre company, and I worked with actors and a dancer and filmmaker when I was young here in Brighton. And I always always wanted to make theatre, but I didn't really want to author or even really direct, and all the sort of authorial responsibility that comes along with directing was just a bit of, I mean, I did want it, but it just came along with too much other stuff that I didn't enjoy, and I just wanted to play, really. And so I was directing and making shows and shows and shows, and then I started teaching directing, and then I was teaching at a university called Dartington, and there I was teaching directing there, and somebody said to me, will you come into this dance studio and give me some feedback? And I went, oh no, I don't know nothing about dance, but okay, I'll come anyway. And I just found out that it's the same, actually, that dance and theatre are the same if you're thinking dramaturgically. And whilst there, somebody told me that what I was doing was being a dramaturg, and I was like, oh, I'll have that. So I took on this fancy mantle, and just got really lucky and just built up work from there. But it's all because I wanted to be in the studio making work, but I didn't want to lead process, and I didn't want to author or perform. I just wanted to pitch in.
Would you say your main job is to make sure that the story is accessible to the audience?
I resist the word story,
Okay,
but I would say because some shows have story and some shows don't, I would say my main job is to find shape. So people say to me, can you work on anything? And I'll say I can work on anything that has a specific line of inquiry. If it's anything goes, I don't know what to do. I once worked on a show where anything goes, and it's like the hardest, you know, it's like my DNA going, oh, I don't know what to do here, because actually I have to find shape things. So my job is to help people find the shape of the work, whether that's a narrative or a spatial development or a thematic development or whatever. And yeah, give that to an audience in a way that is palatable somehow.
Do you find some artists are quite resistant?
Not really, no, because they pay me, and they wouldn't pay me unless they were up for it. So just occasionally somebody will hire me and they'll think, oh, I'll enjoy talking to Lou, and then they find out they hate it. But that's very, very rare. And also they know what they're doing, you know, you have to want to talk about your work with somebody who isn't just going to go, oh, it's amazing. Otherwise you just won't call me. So, but most people enjoy the investment. I think that's one thing I find with young artists, that they feel a bit like, what, me? We can't, not just young artists, British artists maybe, you know, we can't just talk about me because I'm just little old me, but actually you're not little old me. There's thought and art and care and beauty here. So actually most people just enjoy that conversation, and it should feel really nurturing and really supportive, not challenging really in that way.
I would add to that, though, that I have experienced where when Lou is working, that she will make artists think, oh, you know, you said you wanted to do this, but actually I didn't see this. And they will say, no, I did do that. Because it's like Lou was saying, that they're so close to the work that they think, you know, say it's, I don't know, a piece about loss. They're like, no, this really did, this is what it is. And then actually what happens is they go home and they sleep on it and they think, oh yeah, no, I didn't do any of that, Lou's right. And then they come back the next day. So often it takes time for that to filter in.
That's true, but also I can try once, and then I'll try again, and then I'll try, and I don't know how many times I'm prepared to try, but ultimately somebody this morning, in fact, will say to me, Lou, no, I don't think you're right. I don't want to hear what you have to say. Let's just carry, you know, and that's not the end of the relationship. That's the end of that particular conversation. So I have to figure out how many times to try something, but ultimately the power lies with the artist, and they'll do what they want.
I just want to add to that as well. I love that both of you have said that you feel that your role is as a critical friend. And I think that is so hugely helpful from the other side of it when you're in that process. Or I'll speak for myself. When I'm in that process, and if I'm trying to figure something out that isn't making sense to me, I don't want someone to come in the room and blow smoke up my ass and go, oh, it's really great, because ultimately I'm going to go and do that in public somewhere. And I would much rather know that it isn't working before I get to that stage, literally and metaphorically, and from somebody who cares about it and cares about me. So there's something I think about, I think dramaturgs and critical friends in any shape or form are kind of a bit like angels, because they have a huge job of trying to look after you while you're in your fraught ego state, which is how we get. But being able to understand the thing that you're trying to figure out and to help you figure that thing out, when sometimes you just need somebody to go, just take a break, like walk out of the studio for 10 minutes and go have a tea or a gin or whatever it is. And sometimes having somebody just kind of boss me around for 5 minutes is exactly what I need, so that I do clean my head and then we can come back to it. So that it is that thing of a very impressive skill set and an understanding of, not wanting to call it story, but understanding of wanting an audience to feel something or receive something, but also understanding that they're dealing with you as a human being at the same time. And I think that's like, it's incredible. When you find somebody wonderful, don't ever let them go.
And I think also it is what Lou, like sometimes you're just too close, you can't, and somebody will just go, do you know what, you could just do that, and it's like, that's the thing, you just, and then it's like, woohoo. So it is about having...
and often when I think I'm saying something really brave, like I've had to really steel myself and I'm going, oh God, I have to say this today, I don't want to, and I'll say, I'm really, really sorry, I just don't think that scene works, I don't get it, I don't think it does what you want it to do. Nearly always they'll go, I know, but I don't know what to do about it. And I'll say, no, I don't either. Let's sit down, let's think about it, and we'll work it through. So it really is actually exposing people to themselves more often than not.
Yeah. So there's some questions in the chat. Where's my mouse? Let's have a look at the chat. I might start at the bottom because it's easier. Question for Lou Rogers. How did you get your first producer role, as funding needs to be present to apply to pay for a producer? And you mentioned you wrote funding applications. That's from Newport. Do you want to say anything else? Or does that sound like I've read it out right?
Yeah, basically I was a bit puzzled with the whole circle because, you know, ultimately you need money to pay the producer, but at the same time, if the producer is applying for the funding, then how does it all fit into the cycle of actually getting the producer? And how did you get your first role? Really, I'm interested.
Okay, well, I got my first producing role. I trained as a performer. I was working as a performer, and I kept being badgered by some of you might have heard of Bigfoot. It used to be called Bigfoot Theatre Company. It was set by a guy called Carl Wozni, who basically badgered me for a really long time. Come and work for me, darling, come and work for me, you'll be great. And I'd been auditioning a lot and performing a lot, and I was really lucky. I was working, I did have a career, but I had got to that point where I was like, I was missing out on my life. I missed moving house every time we moved house. I missed friends' weddings because I was on tour. And I thought, is this what I want? Is this the life I want? And I thought, maybe it isn't the life I want. I don't think it is. Okay, maybe I'll take Carl up on the offer. So actually I was really lucky because he paid me a salary. So I was really lucky when I first started off, and I started doing loads of theatre and education work, and I had like 90 schools that I was working with to produce work in. And it was a really massive learning curve. It was huge, but I was really lucky. I was paid a salary. So but I would say that, yes, you're right. So now I have a different portfolio career. I am on a salary for Southeast Dance, but I'm also a freelance producer. And a lot of those companies that I work with, we've got a funding cycle in place. So we're constantly getting funding. So there is money that exists in the pot for me to work. So I don't have to do the bit where I work for free writing a funding application, but that's because I've been doing this job for over 25 years. And I think that at the start, it is really difficult. You do have to do that. You will have to do days where you're not paid. And I would never advocate for that. But what I would do is I would put within that, say you're writing Arts Council funding, put within that money for you writing that bid. So you are pinning your hopes on getting that money back. So it's not like you're working for free and then the project happens and then you start to get paid for the days you're doing. There is a line in there that, you know, maybe you even have to call it something else, but you all know there is agreement that that is for you writing that funding bid, that's for you bringing in that money, so you will get that money back at some point. And it is hard, but that's kind of my advice for when you're starting off. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
And there's a question from Alison Thomas which says, at what stage in the process is it most useful for a dramaturg to get involved? Right at the beginning or once some of the initial R&D has been completed? That's from Alison.
I would like to look at Alison.
I'm here. Hi.
No, there you are. Sorry, right there.
That's okay.
Yeah, okay, so it just depends is the answer.
Okay.
It can be to do, mainly it should in theory be about what the artist wants. So some people like to do their sort of initial thinking alone and then kind of present it, and then we go from there. Some people like to do it later. It tends to be about money, so how much time have you got, and you kind of pepper it across. Some people will bring me or a dramaturg in right at the end of a process. I call it sprinkling on depth. But that's not really dramaturgy, and it's not really how it should be, but it can and does happen. So really it's about figuring out what you want and then trying to get the funding for it. But there's no, for me, the answer would be always the sooner the better, because dramaturgy equals depth, and we can do more together if we understand everything and we go from there. But that's not always how it is, so it can just be a bit here, and sometimes it's like a bit in the middle and then that's it, because you know, they just want to be left alone.
Okay.
So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
We've got a question from Ella who's saying, do you need to have theatre experience? I think this is to be a dramaturg. Could you come at it as a dancer, and would this have limitations?
I would say that lots of dramaturgs come from theatre, but I do not think that's necessary at all. In fact, there's plenty you could bring as a dancer. There's plenty I don't know as a non-dancer that it would be really useful if I did know. But I think the skills are other than all of those things, and I think the skills are about this sense of shape and the sort of interpersonal skills and the care and the sensitivity to use language appropriately, that kind of thing. So could you come at it as a dancer? Definitely yes.
And a question for Lou Rogers. What routes are there to becoming a producer, to starting doing producing work? Do you need any official qualifications? And that's from Belinda.
You don't need any official qualifications. There are producer courses. I did have on my notes. Let's see if I can. My notes. Central School of Speech and Drama do an MA in creative producing, which I believe is very good. I do know a couple of people who've done it. Stage 1 have a producer's bursary, which again has a really great reputation, and you get some money to do that, and you get to shadow some amazing producers. There's an MA at Mount View. China Plate do a course which is called The Optimists. Out of Joint used to do a one-day producing course. I don't know whether they still do, and I'm not sure what you'd get out of one day. Dance Umbrella do the producer farm, but you have to have experience. I think you might have had to have a minimum of 5 years experience as a producer to do that. But I did not train as a producer. I did go to theatre school, and I did get a degree in dance, and I very much learned on the job. So those tips that I gave were things that I learned that I needed. I needed to know how everything worked. I needed to know how the sound desk worked and how the lights worked and what everybody's job role was. I spent years going, I've done all sorts of things. I've run venues. I tried to get as much experience as possible. When Edinburgh is back up and running, there's always venues that need people to work at them, you know, doing all sorts of job roles. And yes, it's not paid, but you get to spend a summer in Edinburgh and see some amazing work and meet lifelong friends. You know, that's how I met my husband, working in Edinburgh. That's how, it's one big dating agency. That's what we always used to laugh about for Edinburgh. And we always say, if one of us dies, you just go back to Edinburgh for the summer, find someone else. That's the agreement. So, you know, there's loads of things you can do, and you don't need to have a qualification. It's a bit like what Lou was saying, you know, if you think you've got the skills to do it, then you have to do it, and you have to be organized, and you do have to have good knowledge of what is on. So like I said before, just the training that you need is watching stuff. Learn, what do you like? Why isn't this piece good? Why is this piece good? Why do I think this piece is amazing? You know, all of those things will help you, because they will also help you learn, what producer do you want to do? Do you want to be a producer in musical theatre? Do you want to be a producer on sort of doing big mass movement stuff that Jen was talking? You know, I have done all sorts of I did like Paralympic flame handover and stuff. I have done big things, and actually with all of those things, the thing that I just needed to be friendly and approachable and listen and think about what people needed. So really they're all the same job. But I'm not sure that entirely answered your question. I hope it did, Belinda. But Pip, you might want to add something into that.
Well, I mean, there is an ongoing sort of conversations there about whether you can train to be a producer or whether you just are a producer, and whether they are skills that you just are somebody whose brain thinks in that certain way, and you know, you almost think in 3D, and you love the feeling of problem solving. It makes you feel really good, and you just are like a bit of a dog with a bone for getting something to its end point. You know, you start off at the beginning. Your project's going to have ups and downs, it's going to have things that come up that you didn't expect, it's going to be difficult, especially now, but you're just committed to getting it across that finish line. And you know, also along with that, somebody who, like everybody on the panel has said, you know, you just got a real investment in seeing an artist's vision come to life and be successful and be enjoyed by the audiences, and that whole process just being something that makes you feel really good and excited. And it's generally, yeah, all the other stuff you can learn it. None of it, I mean, I didn't have any training at all. I literally just learned everything on the job. We need to do this, how do we do it? I don't know, I'll find out. You know, you will get there in the end, and as you go along you'll get more and more experience and it gets easier. But I think initially you've just got to be, and you've got to be like a little bit unflusterable by stress. You know, things are going to go wrong, and all you have to do is think about how we're going to get around that. Like now I'm constantly we can't do the things that we had planned, so what do? How do we get around it? We'll get there in the end, you know. So, and it's a great job, I love it, it's the best. So one more question from Florrie to each of the panelists. What is it that one piece, what is that one piece of advice that you have never forgotten about for each of your job roles for starting out? So one piece of advice that has stuck with you, that somebody gave you at some point.
I'll go. So in terms of being a dramaturg, somebody said to me, you can't make an artist make great work, you can only help them make the best work they can make. And that helped me because I have to acknowledge my own power, you know, my own lack of power, and I can't take responsibility for everything that happens. So that just helped me think I've got to do my thing as best as I can, and then it's over to them, really. And the other one I would say is that my mum used to say in the olden days, what do you lose but a stamp? Meaning, just write to them, just call them, just ask them. If they say no, it doesn't matter. But I really did learn that. I did think, oh, well, it's a bit awkward, but I'm just going to ask that person if I can go there and do that. And they're probably going to say no, and they probably are going to say no, but somebody somewhere is going to say yes. And the other one is take small steps. Just do whatever it is that you can, especially now. This is what I'm saying with a lot of people that I'm working with. What is it that you can do? We know what we can't do right now, but what is it that you can do today out there with somebody with meaning? Do that. is what I would say.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I think Lou Coke is often giving very good advice about telling me to say no more often, which I'm really, really bad at. But I encourage all of the artists that I work with to say no, and I will often say no for them. I'm very bad at saying no within my own life, so it is advice that I'm terrible at taking. But yeah, I don't think, you know, often it's really hard as an emerging artist if somebody says to you, oh, I'm going to commission you to do this. And the commission is £250. But I hear this a lot. And I know that people really want to do stuff, but it's, you know, it's how to not be exploited. And often I'm talking to artists I work with, and I'm like, don't do that. Don't do it. Just say no. So I think, you know, all of us can definitely say no a bit more, push back a little bit more. And I think it's not necessarily a piece of advice, but I think like it's really stuck with me that when I started working with Leela Dance, who I work with, is that one day they'd never really performed in London. So they'd done loads and loads of regional touring. So I got them a date to perform in London, and it was all going really well. And the front of house manager in the venue was not that friendly, and she was really pushing them to start the show. But I knew, because I'd been out schmoozing with VIPs that I'd invited, that there were at least 20 people, if not more, in the bar. And so then I came back from the schmoozing, and they were really quite upset. They felt like they thought they'd sold more tickets and there weren't people in, but the front of house manager was saying, no, everyone's in. And I just immediately was like, no, there are people in the bar. I will sort it out. You will go backstage. You, front of house venue manager, will leave it to me. And everything was like, and after Abby was like, because I'm not that sort of person at all. I do a lot of listening, and I'm quite, I think, kind in the room. And she was like, we really saw the producer, Lou. And he was like, and I think you have to have that in you. You have to be able to, like I said, it's really hard, but sometimes you have to be the person who's hated, and it's not nice. But and no doubt I left that venue, and that woman was like, she was a bitch. That person was a bitch. But I came back with a whole trail of audience behind me with their drinks, who then went and sat and had a nice time. So you sometimes just have to sort the shit out.
Can I get that on a t-shirt?
Yes.
I know, that's pretty much, isn't it?
Get out. Oh yeah.
Get this shit done. So Jen Irons, have you got a final thought for us?
I do have a final thought. One of the greatest things, and this isn't actually this is from John Cage and Sister Karita Kent's 10 Rules, which I usually start every talk I ever give with them, and I didn't today because I had loads of other things to say. So I'll put it to Pip to send to you. But one of them is, don't try to create and analyze at the same time, and that to me makes so much sense, because when you're standing in the mirror looking at the movement or looking at the thing, you're judging what you're doing, and it shuts everything down. It's like hitting the gas and the brake at the same time. And so it's really helped me in being mindful of my practice, what Lou was saying, to make the stuff, leave it, or then make the stuff, look at it, make the stuff, then assess it, make the stuff, get some feedback, so that I'm not, and it does come down to budgets and time and things like that, that you've got the time to do that, is make something and then leave it for a week or a year or whatever you need to do. But that just released me from the quagmire of getting into my own brain, or feeling really stressed that I'm trying to deliver something for a director, and being able to say the no thing of saying, we need to work on this for a while. You need to go away, give us some time, and then we'll come back to it. Because when it just doesn't work. So that is one of my favorites, is don't try to create and analyze at the same time. And in a kind of wider thing of advice stuff was, no one is going to show up one day on your door and knock on the door and go, Rachel, you officially have permission to do the thing that you've been thinking about doing. Like it doesn't exist. So don't wait for somebody to give you permission to do that thing. If you're producing, if you have a show and you're making it happen and you've booked a venue and you've hired a technician and you're trying to find somebody to help you make costumes, you are producing that show. You are a producer. Yeah, if you're choreographing a show and you're working with dancers, you are a choreographer. If you are working with a director and you are helping shape what that meaning is, then you are a dramaturg or you are a movement director. You are the thing that you are doing. So don't wait for somebody to tell you that you're doing it. Don't wait to have the MA. I mean, it's great that those things exist, but you don't need an MA. And I don't have an MA in making a bandage advertisement. Do you know what I mean? So don't wait for somebody to give you that permission. And now, especially, if you're interested in something, just try it out, do a day, call someone up, send an email. And as she said, if it costs you a stamp and you don't ever hear back from them, then it's not much of a difference. But in my experience, people are really, really generous. And right now, no one's really got much to do. So definitely hit them up now. Oh, and I'm going to put a link to Twitter of the Movement Directors Association, which they sometimes put workshops and stuff on there and shout outs and stuff. So there you go.
And we can share stuff afterwards. We'll send some stuff out. So Lou and Jen, if you have anything, if you send it to Pip, we can send it out as well. Thanks, everybody. Lovely to see you all.